Hello everyone. Happy weekend. I can't believe it's the weekend again. It feels like I was just here recording a video for you guys, and it's Friday once again. This week I am going to work with the same pinks that I worked with last week, with the exception of using the Quinacridone Gold from Daniel Smith. I really love that yellow, and I think it pairs really well with the pink, and it gives it a little bit more brightness. I am also using the same Baohog watercolor paper, but if you have noticed, it was bending one way, and it means that I wet the backside, which is the front. Because the front is more textured, I want to work on the back side. So I wetted the back side first, or I should say the front. I'm going to confuse you all, aren't I? I am wetting the front, but then I'm working on the back side. So once I sprayed that back side down, it immediately flattened out, and it gave me much less trouble to work with. If you watched my last week's video, I was really struggling because the paper wanted to curl on me. And so this time around, I remembered to make the backside wet first before I start working. And the reason I took it off the block was because I cut it down to the size that I like working with, which is 6x9. And I also want to work on the back side because the paper is not as rough textured. Overall, I am really enjoying working with this paper. It's hard to explain what it feels like when that both front and back are wet. It gives it almost like a leathery feel when I hold it, and it really pleases me in a sense where I can't feel that very textured paper so much, and it also makes the paper very pliable. That might be the wrong word, but it just moves, the colors move very nicely, and picking it up feels really good to me. So I just have to remember to keep doing that. And I might even try that same technique for my Arches watercolor paper that I have that I don't like touching, just to see what it feels like. But anyway, here we are, and I have started putting down my light gold because I like to do that just to give the watercolors a little bit more shimmer and shine. I feel like it works really well this way. And then I went in and put some of that pink and the Quin Gold down. And I just love how these two shades interact with each other. And I like that it gives it a little bit more lightness and a little bit more brightness. Every now and then you see me mopping up the colors a little bit, and that just means that either I didn't like what was going on, or it was starting to get a little bit too muddy, and that is just because I use quite a bit of water on that paper, and so it tends to get a little bit muddled, the colors, and so I mop it up and I add a little bit more later on. I also flick my paintbrush on it, and I've done it a couple times here, and that was just to get most of that pigment out of my brush before I rinse it. you can't really see it afterwards. It has no other meaning other than me cleaning out my brush a little bit more before I rinse it in the water. So I'm putting down paint and I'm mopping it up where I don't like what it was doing, and I add a little more and I take a little bit more off. It's just a little dance just to see how they interact, how they mingle, and to get to a point where I feel like this looks interesting enough for me to let it dry and then continue with the doodling process. Now, if I were to splatter those leftover colors on a slightly more dry paper, then they would stay a little bit longer or stick around. But most of this disappears, and that was the whole reasoning behind it. So I'm going to let it dry and assess and see what else it needs. Right now this is dry, and as you can see, the paper dried fairly flat. It wasn't too buckled and wrinkled, which I really was happy about. So I'm taking my gold and I'm getting ready to splatter, because now that the paper is dry, I can do that and the splatters will stay. And the gold seemed a little bit too light, and so I added just a little bit more of that Queen Gold to it and splattered some more, and that gave me some nice dots that I felt like I could use for doodling later on. I also added a little bit more of that Queen Gold mixture to that bigger splatter, and as it dried it gave me like a Queen Gold halo around the gold splatter, and I really liked that. And so now I'm just gonna find ways to put down my lines first and to continue doodling. I knew I wanted to repurpose those darker splatters and make them into some sort of flower type thing, and that's what I did. And initially I thought maybe that gold splatter could represent like the sun going down into this little valley here, and because those darker spots were a little bit too close to it, I needed to figure out how to get around to do that. At this point, I didn't really know how exactly that was going to happen, so I just continued on putting down the second layer of lines. And I'm always reassessing the composition to see where can I put more lines, where can I balance the painting altogether, what can I do to enhance what I'm doing. It kind of looked like a nature theme, and there was a little bit of gold in that corner, and I decided I would put some sort of tree there, and I really liked how that one turned out. That was one of my favorite parts in this painting. As I am putting down the lines and figuring out what else to do, there is quite a few moments that pass by. Sometimes I walk away and then I come back, and then I try to get as many lines down as I can before I start the doodling and the decorating process of it all. But sometimes my brain requires to just get started with some of the doodles and some of the lines for me to see the bigger picture, and that's what I had to do here. And so that's why you see me putting the lines down and putting the cobblestones down, and just seeing where else it could take me. I kind of wish I had done something else with the dots below the surface. These circles seemed a little bit out of place in the beginning. I think I managed to incorporate them a little bit more later on, but yes, that happens sometimes. But as it goes, you just work with it and you figure it out how you can improve, or maybe incorporate different things that make them not so so separate looking. So you notice I move back up and continue with more lines because I figured it would balance the left to the right a little bit more to bring those vertical lines and the cobblestones on that side of the valley in. This was me thinking and processing my next moves and figuring out what else I could do to bring the piece together. And so I decided to just add more lines and incorporate those circles that way. I did see something in this corner here, so I just started putting down these lines, which I have done before, but they needed a little more. And so the more I was working on them, the more it reminded me of a leaf. And so I decided to stick with that. And I'm really glad I did, because once you see it progress, it really feels whimsical and kind of fairy tale-ish, you know. You know what I'm trying to say? I could have finished the leaf and make it look like an actual leaf, but I didn't want to do that. And I often do these things where it may look like something when it actually isn't. And I think that is a process that I really enjoy, and I recognize the style from a couple years ago when I first started out. And was it a couple years ago, or was it last year? I don't even remember. I think it may have been last year when I did the acrylic paintings and used the background to find shapes and then accentuate those shapes and make it into something outlandish and fairy tale looking. And I recognize that I'm doing the same thing with those watercolor backgrounds. And it just goes to show that sometimes you have to step into another technique or another medium to find that same style and feel confident and happy about where it's going. I hope this all makes sense. Sometimes I just babble and I hope for the best. So I hope I made sense with all of this. I am once again starting to shade certain parts, and I just love the depth that it gives certain areas of my paintings. And isn't it funny how you go through phases that you just have to keep doing in order for a painting to feel complete? And this is me with the shading part. Now that the tree has been shaded a little bit and it's standing out a little bit more, I felt like it needed some more embellishment. So I just stuck with some more lines. In hindsight, I probably could have alluded to leaves a little bit more with doodling, but sometimes it only becomes apparent when I look back at the footage, and maybe that is a sign for me to just wait a little bit longer before I jump into doodling. But when you're in the moment, you just go with what feels normal or natural to you. So it's nothing wrong. But I am making a mental note to myself to maybe take that opportunity in a later painting. I still feel like it needs something down here, but I don't know what just yet. So I don't want to replicate what I have here. I really like this on its own, but in order to balance it out, I feel like it needs something here. So I'm just gonna walk away real quick and mull it over and then come back, and maybe I'll see what else I can do. I also think I'm not quite done with these yet. I like where it's going, but I feel like it needs something more, because these in the beginning were the focus of the painting and now they're almost kind of disappeared. Not disappeared, but they look too small compared to everything else. So that's also something I'm going to think about. So I will be back. Once I bring out my dotting tools, you know that I'm nearing the end and tying everything together. And now it's just a matter of enhancing certain areas or balancing out certain areas. And that's where I feel like the dots really make a difference, at least to me. As you can see, I figured out how to enhance the flowers a little bit more and make them stand out a little bit more. And I'm really happy with how this turned out. It just adds to the whimsiness of the rest of the painting. Sometimes it's a fine balance of how to keep going, and the dots just prove to me that sometimes I don't need to add too much more, and just trust the process and trust that the rest of the embellishments will tie everything together. Adding the gold dots here to finish off the piece before I can call it done. So this is it for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I am super close to 10,000 subscribers, so if you want to be part of the giveaway that I will do once I hit 10,000, please make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I will go a little bit more into detail what my plan is in next week's video, so be sure to tune in next week to hear what the giveaway will include. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next week.